Now we have Robert Grillo is here, and who's going to address what we can do with governments. Perfect segue for you, Robert. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you guys.
Take it away.
All right. Can I get access to share my screen?
You should be a co-host. Yes, you should be able to
Okay.
share. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for having me, and I hope it's very interesting what I've been hearing so far. And what I hope to bring to this discussion is a different way, perhaps, to take action than we often hear about in our movement. It's very common to hear about what I'm talking about in other social movements, like movements for racial justice, and even in the environmental movement, and even in the class and equity, class movement or movement for more equity. Very common to hear about grassroots activism and taking action from a grassroots perspective. But in our movement, it's conspicuously absent for the most part. And that is, I would argue, one of the biggest obstacles to progress. And what I've learned in the last several years from studying other social movements has really opened my eyes to how we could apply many of these lessons learned to our own work. And it's also been, frankly, honestly, a source of great frustration of mine to see the lack of understanding, value, appreciation for the grassroots side of movements and how we can leverage that to our advantage. So I want to talk about a little bit about that today in the context of Free From Harm, which is the organization I founded in 2009. It's a long time. Had to think about that for a minute. For those who haven't heard of Free From Harm, our mission has changed a bit over the years. It used to be just education and outreach. But then we realized that that's just the beginning. Like, education and outreach is important, but that doesn't alone bring about a social movement. And so we started to realize that we needed to change our mission. Our current mission is to advance a plant-based and slaughter-free food system, as well as challenge the dominance of animal agriculture through bold and innovative grassroots action. And I'd like to explain why I think taking bold and innovative action is important, critical, and what it actually means. So in five, I'll break it down into kind of five main reasons. First, like I said before, taking bold action builds on the successes of other important social movements, and other nonviolent resistance movements, not just throughout history, but in the current times, right? So, for example, when we look at a movement like Black Lives Matter or just racial justice in general, what we find is that there were certain events that became trigger events that really galvanized public support. And where did the leaders of Black Lives Matter or Occupy Wall Street direct their attention? Or even the environmental movement in terms of trying to move away from fossil fuels and to renewable forms of energy, which is the primary focus of the environmental movement. What they did is they looked at the top companies, the top polluters, the top people running those organizations, the top people in government that were they're doing their bidding because they make money. They get money from them for their campaign contributions and PACs. Occupy Wall Street went after the top banks, the top Wall Street investors, the people that were really responsible for what was happening. Black Lives Matter went after the top people in the criminal justice system and demanded change. So why aren't we more actively demanding change from not just, Congress, but also the food system, the people that are basically calling the shots? And we all know how centralized our food system has become. And so there's only a handful of companies that really control things. And then there's about 20 or 30 Congress people that really control things. So why aren't we directing our attention to these incredibly powerful people making such consequential decisions that affect billions of animals' lives, the fate of billions of animals, and the decisions that millions of humans have in terms of food options? I'm not sure why, but that's what I want to argue that we should be doing.
Robert, can you go into slideshow mode?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, let me see how that works here with me being able to see. That's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
The second reason is that when we take bold action, we're also exercising our rights and freedoms. And that's incredibly important, because if we don't use our voice, if we don't speak truth to power, if we don't engage in action, we're not using our rights, and we risk losing them. We don't keep a democracy, or we don't preserve a democracy or try to move in that direction unless we actually exercise the democratic process. The third reason is connected to this, that, I always say that our struggle for animals and the planet is also a struggle for democracy, because it's under attack just as much as animals and the planet are under attack. Also, number 4, so taking bold action is the spark. I like to say it's the spark that creates the momentum, that creates also the popular support that a movement needs to propel itself into the mainstream consciousness. And we haven't gotten there yet, because we haven't, in many ways, haven't taken the bold action that's necessary on a scale that I think we would need to. But the fifth and last reason we take bold action is we want media attention, right? We want the public's attention. And we have to do this not with lots of facts and figures, but with emotions and capturing our audience's hearts and minds. Yes, science is important, facts and figures are important, but the studies I've looked at show that people are much generally moved by emotional stories and symbolic stories with heavy symbolic content, which is why certain movements take on a mantra that really works for them, like freedom to marry, like Black Lives Matter, like silence equals death. Just a few words that capture the meaning of the movement. And I often ponder what that is for us, but I don't think we have a unified message like that. So one of the most important things, I think, when carrying out a social movement is to understand the power structure. And this is where I think we often don't look at, whereas other movements, it's one of the most fundamental things to look at. So when it comes to looking at how decisions are made about funding animal agriculture or funding plant-based proteins or plant-based agriculture, we look to the Farm Bill because that's the most consequential piece of legislation that provides funding for the agriculture industry overall. And we're in the throes of it right now. But many think that nothing will happen until next year. But when it comes to the Farm Bill, it's a federal bill. And so that means that our attention should be directed at Congress, particularly the people that are on the committees, the Senate and House Agriculture committees that are drafting the initial bills for the Senate, Democrat and Republican sides of the versions of the bill. So, but all Congress people eventually have to vote for the bill, which means that we should be educating them and putting pressure on them to vote for a food system, for a future food system that we want. And in our case, we're asking for an end to animal agriculture subsidies. We call it the big animal ag bailout. It's a hugely big waste of money. I don't know how else to say it. This is a $256 billion industry that does not need to be bailed out. In some sectors like chicken, it's making record profits and experiencing record growth. It does not need money from working Americans. And this is the message that we have for Congress people. We ask them to vote against any farm bill that will bail out, that continue this massive bailout of this industry and direct those subsidies to plant proteins instead. So the reason why we like using or leveraging the Farm Bill or an issue like bird flu is because it's in the news cycle. And we want to insert our voice in the news cycle. Whatever's newsworthy is of interest to us, especially if it's agriculture related. And we think that there's a strong likelihood that, in fact, we see it, people across the political spectrum believe fundamentally that it's wrong for hardworking Americans to be paying for problems that an industry like animal agriculture has created, like bird flu. We've spent billions of tax dollars to mitigate bird flu outbreaks across the country. The industry pays nothing for it. Taxpayers pay everything, including the replacement of the millions of chicks from the hatcheries after the factory farms and facilities are sanitized with toxic chemicals. We even pay for the new chicks. So it's a great booming business for the hatcheries. And the industry's profits are protected and taxpayers foot the bill. Another reason why we like bird flu is because we look at it as an Achilles heel. In other words, it's a vulnerability that if things keep going bad and things continue the way they are going with bird flu, this could really negatively impact the industry, the chicken and egg and dairy industries, because there's no end in sight here. This has been 2 years now that this outbreak has been happening, and it keeps coming up. We keep hearing about new infections, and over 200 mammals now on the planet, the USDA has documented have tested positive for bird flu. We also like to focus on these bird flu and farm bill issues because we can expose some of the industry's most heinous practices, like ventilation shutdown, which is cooking birds alive. It's the cheapest, fastest way to kill millions of birds that are part of an outbreak like bird flu. And we also like the fact that working on bird flu and the farm bill is, like I said earlier, engaging in the political process, in the process of using our rights and calling for an end to the corruption that's threatening our democratic processes. We also like the fact that it fits with our mission of speaking truth to power and targeting the top power holders in the food industry and in Congress. Like I said, these are decisions that impact billions of animals and human lives. And so we have here a model of escalation that we often refer to, because it's important to have a path for activism, and that you don't just give up when your organization and its supporters have sent hundreds and thousands of emails and phone calls to their congresspeople saying, don't support the EATS Act, or don't, whatever it is. Those only go so far sometimes. So we have to determine what we're going to do once those measures fail. And in a nonviolent framework, how we're going to escalate our pressure and momentum on our target, which is people working on the Farm Bill, Congress people working on the Farm Bill. So that might mean then escalating to the next level, which would be getting groups of people together to go visit their Congress people and trying to get meetings with them, which will be difficult. Our senator here in Illinois, Dick Durbin, who's going on one of the longest standing senators, one of the most powerful. He's on the Senate Agriculture Committee, hasn't said a thing about the Farm Bill in the last 6 months, hasn't done a town hall to talk to people in his district or in the state about their concerns about the Farm Bill or anything else, hasn't held a town hall in the Chicago area since 2018. Won't take meetings. So we went to his office and we talked to staff. We told him, we delivered our message about the Farm Bill, and that we urge him to vote against any Farm Bill, any version of a Farm Bill that continues this disastrous and massive bailout of animal agriculture, despite all the little things that they throw in to make it seem like they're doing some good things. Nothing really, everything is undermined. All those good things, unfortunately, are undermined by the massive animal agriculture bailout that they're all for. They're all for the pro-animal ag. And then, so the highest level of escalation is protest and confrontation. And so when the office visit attempts don't work, then you have to decide, how are you going to get in front of these power holders? How are you going to get that important message out and put pressure on these people and make them understand that we're here, we're not going away. And so this means finding them ideally in public venues, like a press conference would be great, because the media is there. The media will cover what you're doing 9 times out of 10. So the DNC is coming up. The DNC is a wonderful opportunity for us to get to talk directly to lots of different Congress people that are involved in agriculture and the Farm Bill. So we look forward to that. But yeah, we have to get in front of them. That to me is a key point here in terms of this escalation model. And we help a lot of people in terms of trying to plan actions of their own, because we want to provide a model, and we want to model actions for others so that they can brainstorm and develop their actions where they are. So here's just our quick checklist of this is what makes a good action, basically, the nuts and bolts. Who's your target? Who are you targeting? Who's the power holder? Is it your Senator Dick Durbin or other senator or congressperson? Where are they going to appear? What events and future opportunities are there? Maybe it's a community event. Maybe it's a gay pride parade, which Dick Durbin marches in every year. And then study the history of your target and what's their history and track record of showing up for things. And that could give you a good clue into what to look for in the future. And then some good questions to ask, I think, are, is this going to be a face-to-face action? Assuming that you've already gotten to a point where, oh yeah, you and your supporters have contacted this person until you're blue in the face and they easily ignore you. Is this a face-to-face action? Is your target likely to be present at this event? Is the media likely to cover it? We want that. Remember, we want to have media attention, because I often tell people, it used to be me too, complain about the fact that the media never comes to our events. Have you heard that? A lot of times we bemoan the fact that the media doesn't want to cover this subject, and they don't want to come to our events. But what we should be doing is what other movements do, which is go to their events. So like brilliant ideas are just like, get in front of the cameras. If somebody, you know, like is of some consequence is doing a speech and you have an important message, then you need to get in front of the media and insert yourself in the situation, in the places of where power is, not on the outside, but where they are, and you know, you're being a part of it. And then you ask yourself, I think a good question is it feasible for you and your team? Can you pull it off? Have you thought through all the logistics? And if there's a public audience, that's even better. However, the media being there is most important, because if you get media coverage, then you get hopefully a lot of coverage, you know, you get a lot of exposure to the public. And so now I have two more parts to this, if that's okay. I have a short highlights video showing you some of our actions that we've done at animal agriculture conferences, at congressional farm bill hearings, and similar kinds of events where power holders are, just to give you a flavor for some of the work we and our you know, supporters around the country have been doing. So let me just change this sharing. Okay. All right. I'm just going to go into slideshow mode. Oh. Hold on, I'm sorry. That do it. Let's see. Enter full screen. There we go. Okay. Can everyone see this video screen here?
Yes, we can.
Considering the fact that the chicken industry has already rendered profits recently, rather than the beginning is spending billions of taxpayer money to get we're going to fight on their own. It's an operating expense for them, not something the public should be paying for.
Taxpayer dollars bailing out the chicken and egg industry for a bird flu nightmare that they created. The USDA's mission is to create safe and nutritious foods, yet instead, You are the chicken industry's puppet, protecting an industry making record profits and betraying America's health and safety. This industry forces billions of birds to live in health confinement, perfect conditions for new pandemics, with a constant supply of new COVID.
Defund factory farms. Stop the bird flu bailout. So how can you greenwash dairy? How can you sit up there and pretend that the dairy industry is anything but cruel and inhumane and unsustainable? None of you honestly believe that exploiting millions of cows for their milk could ever be sustainable when there are so many plant-based alternatives. And now, to add insult to injury, your industry feeds chicken feces that is infected with bird flu to dairy cows. So now cows have become the vector for human bird flu infection. Experts have been warning about a potential bird flu pandemic for years. But now the worst part of this is that Congress is bailing this industry out with our hardworking tax dollars. You caused these disease outbreaks. We are not going to pay to bail out the industry.
Not another penny for putting millions of birds alive.
Drought is caused by animal agriculture, and we will keep disrupting until we switch to a plant-based food system.
Hardworking Americans are paying for this entire process over $1 billion and counting so far, and the chicken and egg industries are paying nothing.
Animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of drought and climate change.
They will be in order. There being order. The committee will stand in recess until the police can restore order.
You know, it's kind of a shitty video, don't you think? I mean, you guys are taking advantage of an event where you're not really paying for anything, you're just taking advantage of people.
American tax dollars should not be spent on bailing out the animal ag industry, which has bird flu and other diseases and horrible conditions the animals are in.
Animal agriculture is one of the leading causes of climate change. 54% of the water in the Colorado Basin goes toward animal farming. We need to end the causes, not fund them. Animal ag is causing the climate crisis.
Don't touch her, don't touch her. Don't touch her, don't
Okay, so I'm going back to my slide. I have just one more closing slide here. Thanks for bearing with me. I just want to close with introducing a new effort we call Action Hour, which is a weekly Zoom call that anybody can call in to get help. It's kind of like a hotline, but it's a Zoom line. So it's a once a week session where activists can come in and ask their questions and get the help they need to plan their bold and innovative grassroots action for food system change. We do breakout sessions and follow-ups with people that need more in-depth help. So please look for Action Hour. We're putting a lot of effort into promoting it, so hopefully you'll see it around. And even if you just want to drop in and see what it's like and what's going on and just observe, that's totally fine too. So thank you so much for your time and interest today.
Thank you, Robert, for all that you do. May I ask you what happened after you got arrested?
Well, you know, that's an interesting thing because contrary to popular belief, I would say, most people think it was really quite a dramatic thing to be arrested. But actually, prior to that happening, let me just give you a little bit of context. We had been waiting for 5 hours trying to get into the hearing room, which was supposed to be open to the public and supposed to have seating for the public. But we waited out in line for 3 hours with a bunch of lobbyist people. And at a certain point, we said, you know what, if we're going to get in, we're just going to have to get in front of this line. And we're going to have to find a moment, maybe a split second when the door person is distracted and they don't see us get in. And that's what happened. The 5 of us got in, 3 of us did spoke out of turn, which is grounds for arrest. They can arrest you for speaking out of turn after the gavel goes down and they call for order in the hearing. And so 3 of us were arrested on a disorderly conduct charge, which was a $35 fine and about a 2-hour detainment while they're writing up the police report. But I can tell you it was a minor inconvenience compared to the incredibly oppressive environment in the halls of Congress, and where things like farm bills are being deliberated. It's a hostile environment for the public that are interested in, and you know, they don't necessarily know we're activists. They do now, but at the time they didn't. And so it's hostile to the public. So it's concerning to me on the level of a free society that we aspire to be, that members of the public are treated pretty poorly, terribly in these kinds of settings.
Yeah. One question in the chat is, can you ask, well, when does Action Hour happen? Weekly?
Thank you for asking. I should have said that. It happens on Wednesdays at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. And it's an hour long.
And is there a Zoom link that you can share, or is it?
Yes, there's a registration link that I can share in the chat for sure.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be good. And Rebecca is asking, maybe I'll get to Rebecca after Liz. Liz, do you want to ask your question?
Hi, Robert, it's such a pleasure to meet you. I remember first being inspired by your work on a LinkedIn page on one of the first vegetarian groups or something. And I just can't tell you how excited I was to read about what you were doing and the impact you were making. I wanted to let you know that I think open mic opportunities with our local academic administration, the city. You know, you have these board meetings where they have public comments, and you did such a good job. You're showing some examples of what can be done. There's an open invitation right there. All of us should be looking at the schedule for your local academic administration's board meeting. Put it on your calendar, get some friends together, and just go show up. Sometimes they request that you file intent to speak. So go to their websites, file your intent, get on the list. And then, yeah, we just have to keep bringing it up and stirring the pot. And one of my things is I'm asking for new accredited curriculum in plant-based foods for chef training programs. If we can get to the root of education and change the system so that we have informed consumers, K through 12, we have chefs trained in plant-based foods, doctors trained in nutrition, and just more consumer education will get us to the finish line here. So you're leading the way, and I wanted to thank you for just being an inspiration over the years. I've been vegan for about 12 years now, and I've really enjoyed following your work. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you so much, Liz. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Liz does a lot of local activism and she's amazing. Yeah.
That's great to hear.
Yeah, it's about using every because it's as you pointed out, it's a very repressive system.
Yes. I'd just like to add to, you know, to build on what Liz was saying, that I think, you know, many people don't not vegan or not, or, you know, whether they're in our movement or not, have very little grasp of just how powerful certain people are in our food system. And by directing our attention on them, there's so much at stake, and it's so worth it. It really fires people up to even just to get awareness out to them. So we knew that when we were at that Senate hearing where we were arrested, for example, those are some of the top decision makers in the country that are deciding how $1.5 trillion is going to be spent over the next 5 years in the agriculture industry. They want to pour a bunch of money into animal agriculture. It's like pouring money into fossil fuels and dirty energy. It makes no sense. And they need to hear that a dissenting view, even if that dissenting view doesn't change the farm bill for this go around. It plants the seeds for a future change, which is what we aspire to do. What we do is it's called changing the weather activism. It's used in other movements too, but it's about awareness directed at power holders. And so I just can't emphasize the importance of more of us, you know, taking that route.
Rebecca, did you want to ask your question directly? Okay, I can ask. There you are.
Well, I wanted to know if you have planned attorneys ready to go, if you have attorneys in your group. That's what I did with One Action, had some attorneys there, and we also had people who didn't have attorneys there. And so I wonder if you'd talk about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think maybe, Rebecca, you mean like for legal support, right? For the activists?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Yes. When we do, so with the, we calculate the risk involved, and then we build our legal support based on that, with what we think the risk is. So with the Senate or congressional hearings, we know there's a 50-50 chance. if the gavel goes down and we're still talking, there's a 50-50 chance. The police can be nice. The Capitol Police can be nice and say, hey, I'm sorry, you got to go, and kind of start pushing you out. Or they can put handcuffs on you right away. I personally think that what happened with the Thompson, who's the chairman of that hearing, Agriculture Committee, I think he disliked us very much. And I think that he wanted the police to take as a Diocletian, to crack down on us and teach us a lesson. The interesting thing about that, though, is that it actually heightened the interest in our action. And we had reporters from Politico and The Hill and Bloomberg asking us questions about our action and our position. So it actually generated a lot more interest than had we not been arrested. In other actions where we're in, like, let's say we're doing, you saw one of the videos, I actually waited for the Q&A, and I was the first person to be asked if I wanted to ask a question. I said, sure, I'd love to be that got the microphone. There was a room about 400 or 500 people, and I knew the microphone would help as far as being clearly heard. So that was playing by their rules. And I didn't expect to be like arrested or have any legal issues for that. But in the case of hotels or conference centers or trade events, the risk is generally pretty low because the police, as long as you comply with the order of police to leave, that's generally a situation where you're going to leave and there's going to be no incident. But usually you're gone way before the police even show up. But we do have legal support, and we always have it because it's also good for us to know, to have the legal support, because when we know what our rights are and we know what our responsibilities and rights are, we're willing to take bolder action.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Rebecca. And thank you, Robert. It's a question. Do you have any advice for those of us who are employed by local governments and worry about repercussions? So
that could be tricky. Yeah, that could be tricky because they could reprimand you, but you'd have to know on what grounds they could reprimand, or whether they could do it or not. But even if everybody has, certain, I don't want to say conflicts of interest, because that's not necessarily the right word. But if you get where I'm going with this, like, we all have connections with others and other organizations. And sometimes that makes us difficult to act in the way we would like to act. And I think each person has to kind of navigate that for themselves. If I was working a government job, I would really want to investigate, like, whether or not I could take a bold action that might end up with a misdemeanor charge of disorderly conduct. It may or may not. Oftentimes it won't, doing this kind of stuff. But if you do engage in civil disobedience and there is a chance of arrest on a low misdemeanor charge, usually a low misdemeanor charge is not grounds for any consequences with work.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be like a felony charge usually.
Yeah. They elaborated a bit. So I'm part of a union, but still have concerns as a working class person of color and survival. I worry about my ability to help other species being hindered if I lose my means of survival and healthcare coverage. It's a very personal decision that you're making, right? Every one of us has to make it on our own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
mean, I feel, yes, absolutely. Weighing all the complexities
Right.
of the decision. The one thing I just, and this is not in response necessarily to that last person, I completely understand that position that they're in. I feel fortunate because I'm able to do this. I feel privileged that I can do this, and I think, you know, fortunate that I can do it. But one of the biggest obstacles to becoming active or more active is fear. It's really the fear of the unknown, the fear of not being in front of an audience that where you have a dissenting view.
Right.
And the media also maybe even capturing that. And so it takes a lot of preparation for some people to really get there mentally, psychologically, where they're ready to do something. But there's also lots of other roles where you don't have to necessarily be in the spotlight.
Right.
And you're not the person speaking. You're the person taking video, or you're the person playing many of the other roles, kind of the behind the scenes roles that are needed in order to organize an action like the ones I showed you in the video. It's 80% planning and 20% doing. The 80% planning, we need lots of folks for that kind of 80% work.
Right. Paige? Go
Hi,
ahead.
Robert. Hi.
Hi, Paige.
Hi there. So what would you say to someone who doesn't necessarily want to get arrested, but would like to take it up a notch? Not that you want to get arrested. I'm just saying, you know, someone who looks like me, who can get myself into a courtroom. I've been able to get myself into situations because they don't think I'm going to be someone who would be a disruptor. And at the same time, you know, I want to kind of move the needle to the next impact without getting arrested. So I know we don't know when we're going to get arrested, but what would you suggest for someone, you know, someone like me?
Yeah, well, there's that. Yeah, I think that's a great question, because there's a lot of lower risk. It's all about risk. Everything's a risk. Everything we do is a risk. We never know what's going to happen sometimes, even if we're just standing on a street corner and we're doing like a fur protest, or, you know, some crazy person could come out of the bushes and, you know, start harassing us or worse. We never know. But at the same time, there's lots of de-escalation tactics that we can use to resolve conflicts in the moment and to de-escalate situations that are getting a little bit out of hand. So, but the important thing is, I would like to suggest this. The important thing to me is getting in front of, face to face with those in power that have the power to meet your demand. If our demand is a transition, a just transition to a plant-based food system, the important thing is our ability to be able to communicate that face to face, because they can't ignore us in that environment. It's not so much disrupting, but finding opportunities to get face to face. So it could be a town hall. It could be an office visit. You could find your senator or congressperson at a pride parade or other kind of parade or other kind of event. And if you can get face to face and get that on video so people can see that this is possible, the more we put that out there, I think the more people will make the effort and see the value in doing it. If that makes sense.
But, yes, it does make sense. I was with someone that you know well from New York Activism, and we saw Jane Fonda recently in Beverly Hills at an art event.
Yeah.
And this person had shared with me that she had thanked Jane Fonda for her work with the animals. And she kind of had this puzzled look on her face. And so I said, oh, that's such a good idea. I'm going to do it too. So I went up and I said, Jane, thank you so much for your work for the animals, for the planet, and allowing and bringing Joaquin Phoenix on stage in 2019 at the Climate Summit, the Fire Drill Fridays. And she kind of looked at me and she said, I love Joaquin Phoenix. And that was it. And I thought, you know what? That's the kind of thing, like not try to, but just say thank you. And that was, to me, a bold move. And I felt really good about it.
Great job, Paige.
That's great. Yeah.
So I'm going to do more of those. So, but do you have somewhere where people can see your de-escalation tactics for us? Like, is there like a tip sheet or something like that?
Good question. There are some resources that I would recommend. And yeah, I could certainly, I can't come up with a link on the spot, but I do have some resources that I could refer someone to. It's important, like, I think, to gauge, when we gauge a situation and we find that there's tension brewing or there's somebody who's really hostile, sometimes sitting down is one of the most de-escalating things we could do. Actually finding a seat. If we're standing, giving a speak out, or moving away from that person that's hostile or agitated, moving away from that person. Or if the police seem overly exaggerated in their response to us, find a seat and put your hands up. There's a lot of things like that that activists do to diffuse and try to bring more peace to the situation, because we're kind of walking a tightrope. Like, we need to agitate, we need to create a crisis. It's a moral crisis that we're in, right? And we need to express that. We're experiencing a moral urgent crisis with the planet and with animals and with ourselves. We have a future pandemic that could potentially really do some damage. So we have to walk this we have to find this balance where we're impressing upon people the urgency, the seriousness, but also not, we don't want to, we don't want to create a violent situation. So fortunately, I've never been, I've been in situations where there's people that were really agitated. In my younger years, I kind of fought with them a little bit, kind of like maybe had a, argument. But I think I've learned how to use de-escalation in a way that has, fortunately, I've not been in situations that are threatening like that. And I'm not saying they don't exist, of course, but I think we just need to, kind of learn that and use it to our advantage, and walk that kind of tightrope.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Paige.
Question from the chat. In such intangible work, how do you measure your results, especially for funding sources?
So I like that question, because I think we should always determine how we measure success and how we define success. There's lots of different ways to define success. I wouldn't necessarily, I think there's a lot of tangible, concrete measures of success. I'll give a few. Like, so for example, when we started this process of speaking out about the bird flu situation and the bailout money, the over $1 billion being spent, of our tax dollars being spent to bail out the industries for their bird flu mess that they've created. Nobody in the media was really saying anything negative about this policy. No one was questioning, nothing that I could see.
Right.
about questioning the policy, this disastrous policy of bailing out an industry and protecting their profits when they're the actual problem, they're creating the problem. Until about 8 months into this, we saw on the cover of the New York Times cover story, a story that basically captured what we have been saying, what we have been getting thrown out of rooms for in front of powerful people, saying basically the same thing. Is it really the right way to solve a bird flu crisis by giving the industry millions of dollars and killing millions of chickens? Is that really the way to solve this problem? And that was the critical story that the New York Times and other mainstream media outlets started putting out, which didn't mention us, but that doesn't matter, you see, because the important thing is that our message has permeated mainstream consciousness at that point. That's one of the big steps forward. So there's a tangible result. Another measure of that I'll just mention real quick, another measure of success or progress, I suppose you could say, is, and this is coming from Paul and Mark Engler, who are wonderful scholars and activists themselves, who wrote the book, This is an Uprising. One of the big, so there's two. Are you building capacity and are you building popular support? And if you can say that you're doing one or both of those things, then you're on the right direction. If the tide of popular support is turning in your favor and you're building capacity in terms of supporters, volunteers, activists that are getting more involved, that's a good sign.
Another question is, have you had any success reaching out to vegan or vegetarian members of Congress?
Are there any? No, I know there's a few. So no, actually, Cory Booker is one of the people on our team is in New Jersey and has tried to reach out to Cory Booker and get a meeting and pursue this model of activism that we're doing, and hasn't had much success yet. And so we know that some members like Cory Booker are more progressive in this way. But there's a great saying that I always love to refer to by Bill Moyer, not the TV host Bill Moyer, but the activist Bill Moyer, from the anti-war activist from the 60s, from the Vietnam War era. He said, movements lead, politicians follow. Social movements lead, politicians follow. Our expectations of what politicians do and think and how they make change, or whether they make change or not, should always be, we always have to, a movement always has to be behind any major legislative decision. So we have a lot of work to do to build that popular support before we can expect members of Congress to wake up and say, boy, I think I need to change my policy on this. It's kind of like the gay marriage example is a good one to look at, because the Clintons and Obama, they were all saying that marriage was just between a man and a woman, even progressives. And then the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage was the law of the land. And all of a sudden, the politicians came out and said, oh, yeah, I've been for gay marriage for decades. I mean, when they're lying through their teeth. So the important lesson here is that we just need to hold politicians accountable, and we need to apply the necessary pressure to make to codify the changes into law. But that doesn't happen until we really build the support for that.
Okay. One last question is pretty quick, actually. Do you have a designated police liaison person at your actions?
No, because we have actions around the country, so there's no one person. There's several people that do that, play that role in different places and for different actions, and just like all the other roles. But yes, that varies.
There varies, but you do have one at each action, someone who can.
Yes, if
Okay.
we're expecting, so yes, to the extent that we're expecting a police presence, but that's more the exception than the rule.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a question from Bhavna, but Bhavna, I think your question, you already answered it. So we'll move on to Jane. Thank you so much, Robert, for telling us about your actions. It's inspiring work that you're doing.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.